Vietnam unfolds like a scroll painting brought to life, where every brushstroke reveals another layer of beauty, complexity, and wonder. This slender country stretches along the eastern edge of Southeast Asia, like a dragon curving through landscapes that shift from misty mountain peaks to emerald rice paddies, from limestone karsts rising from turquoise waters to beaches where white sand meets the South China Sea. The journey through Vietnam isn't just a passage through geography, but a voyage through time itself, where ancient traditions thrive alongside modern innovation, where incense smoke from century-old temples drifts past glass towers, and where the echo of history resonates in every cobblestone street and jungle path. The moment you arrive, Vietnam seizes your senses. The air carries fragrances that tell stories. Wood smoke mingling with lemongrass, fish sauce blending with jasmine, tropical fruits competing with fresh brewed coffee. Sounds layer upon sounds, motorbikes humming like mechanical bees through narrow streets, vendors calling out their wares in sing-song tones, temple bells ringing across dawn-lit valleys, waves crashing against rocky shores. Colors burst everywhere you look, from the golden glow of ancient citadels to the vibrant greens of endless rice terraces, from the deep blue of mountain lakes to the ochre walls of colonial buildings weathered by monsoon rains. Begin in the north, where Halong Bay presents one of nature's most spectacular performances. This UNESCO World Heritage Site defies simple description, though countless travelers have tried to capture its essence. Nearly 2,000 limestone islands and islets rise dramatically from the Gulf of Tonkin, their steep cliffs covered in jungle vegetation, creating an otherworldly seascape that shifts with every change of light. Early morning transforms the bay into a realm of mystery, where mist clings to the karst formations like silk scarves, obscuring the line between sea and sky. Traditional wooden junks with rust-colored sails glide through these waters, their presence adding a timeless quality to scenes that could belong to any century. The limestone formations themselves tell geological stories spanning millions of years. Some islands feature caves carved by water and wind into cathedral-like chambers, their walls glittering with minerals that catch lantern light. Sung Sot Cave, whose name translates as Surprise Cave, lives up to its billing with vast chambers filled with stalactites and stalagmites, shaped by patient time into forms that spark imagination. Other islands harbor hidden lagoons, circular pools of emerald water surrounded by sheer cliff walls, accessible only through low-tide tunnels that kayakers navigate with held breath and wide eyes. Life continues on Halong Bay in ways that seem borrowed from another era. Floating villages dot the waters, communities where generations of families have built their homes on platforms lashed together with rope and ingenuity. Children paddle to school in small boats, fishermen tend their nets from vessels that double as bedrooms and kitchens, and women in conical hats cultivate oyster farms beneath their floating houses. These communities exist in harmony with the water, reading its moods, respecting its power, drawing sustenance from its depths. Visiting a floating village offers glimpses into resilience and adaptation, showing how humans can thrive in the most unlikely environments. The bay's islands each possess distinct personalities. Some are large enough to support beaches where visitors can swim in calm waters, their feet sinking into sand that feels like powdered sugar. Others remain uninhabited and mysterious, their caves and grottos unexplored, their jungle canopies hiding whatever creatures have claimed these limestone sanctuaries. Tai Top Island offers steep climbs rewarded with panoramic views that stretch across the entire bay, revealing its true scale and the intricate patterns formed by hundreds of karst formations scattered across miles of water. Traveling inland from Halong Bay, the landscape transforms gradually, coastal plains giving way to foothills that build toward the mountains marking Vietnam's border with China. The journey north to Sapa takes travelers through regions where the modern world's grip loosens, where rural life continues in rhythms dictated by seasons and harvests rather than clocks and schedules. The road itself becomes part of the adventure, winding through valleys where water buffalo graze beside highways, past villages where houses built on stilts perch above flood-prone ground, through markets where ethnic minority groups gather to trade goods and stories. Sapa sits at roughly 1,500 meters above sea level, a mountain town wrapped in mist and legend. French colonists established it as a hill station in the 1920s, seeking refuge from lowland heat in these cooler elevations. What they found was a landscape of staggering beauty, mountains cascading downward in terraced rice fields that follow every contour of the slopes, valleys filled with clouds that drift like living things, peaks that seem to touch the sky. Today, Sapa retains some colonial architecture, stone churches and villas that blend European sensibilities with mountain practicality. But the town's true character comes from the ethnic minority groups who call these mountains home. The rice terraces around Sapa rank among the world's most photographed agricultural landscapes, yet no image fully captures their impact. These terraces represent generations of labor, families shaping mountainsides into staircases that climb from valley floors to ridgelines. During planting season, the terraces fill with water, and creating mirrors that reflect sky and clouds, turning entire mountains into shimmering mosaics of blue and green. As rice grows, the terraces shift through shades of emerald and jade, each field slightly different in tone, depending on water depth and plant maturity. Harvest time brings golden hues, and after harvest, the terraces return to brown earth, awaiting the cycle's renewal. Walking through Sapa's surrounding villages means stepping into living museums of tradition and culture. The Hmong people, identifiable by their indigo-dyed clothing and elaborate silver jewelry, have inhabited these mountains for centuries. Women wear intricately embroidered jackets and skirts, their handiwork displaying patterns passed down through generations, each stitch carrying cultural meaning. In villages like Kat Kat and Ta Van, traditional houses built from timber and bamboo cluster together, their roofs weighted with stones against mountain winds, their interiors dark and smoky from cooking fires that never quite go out. The Red Dao people add another cultural dimension to Sapa's ethnic tapestry. Red Dao, women shave their eyebrows and foreheads, wearing elaborate headdresses decorated with coins and red tassels that identify their marital status and village origin. They've developed deep knowledge of medicinal herbs found in these mountains, creating remedies and bathing treatments that tourists now seek out in village homestays. These communities welcome visitors with genuine warmth, sharing meals of sticky rice and vegetables grown in mountain gardens, demonstrating weaving techniques on wooden looms, as teaching phrases in languages that have no written form. Fansipan, Vietnam's highest peak, looms over Sapa like a protective guardian. At just over 3,000 meters, this mountain once required serious trekking expeditions to summit, multi-day journeys through difficult terrain that tested even experienced climbers. Now, a cable car system carries visitors to near the peak, though the mountain hasn't lost its majesty. On clear days, views from Fansipan's summit stretch across mountain ranges that fold into the distance like waves in a stone sea, valleys disappearing into depths that seem bottomless, clouds drifting below eye level. The summit's pagodas and Buddhist statues add spiritual dimensions to the natural spectacle, so creating spaces where visitors pause not just to catch their breath, but to contemplate the vast forces that shaped these mountains. Weather in Sapa proves as changeable as the landscape. Mornings might begin shrouded in fog so thick you can barely see your hand before your face, only to have sunlight burn through by midday, revealing vistas that stretch for miles. Rain arrives suddenly and leaves just as quickly, waterfalls appearing on cliff faces where none existed hours before. Winter brings cold that surprises travelers expecting perpetual tropical warmth, occasionally even dusting the highest peaks with snow. This climatic variety creates ecological niches where temperate and tropical species mingle, where orchids bloom in forests of pine and bamboo. The journey south from Sapa toward Vietnam's heart passes through Hanoi, the country's capital and cultural soul. This city wears its 1,000 years of history like layers of paint on an old door, each era leaving marks that blend into a complex patina. The Old Quarter remains the heart of Hanoi's character, 36 streets that traditionally each specialized in particular trades. Though modernization has diluted this pattern, echoes remain. Silk Street still gleams with fabrics, Tin Street still rings with the sounds of metalwork, and throughout the quarter, narrow shophouses lean against each other like old friends sharing secrets. Hoan Kiem Lake serves as Hanoi's gathering place, a body of water steeped in legend about a sacred turtle and a magical sword. The lake sits like a calm eye at the center of urban chaos, surrounded by trees that provide shade for chess players, lovers, and morning exercise enthusiasts performing Tai Chi with movements so slow they seem suspended in time. The red-painted bridge leading to Ngok Son Temple rises from the lake's northern end, a structure so photographed it's become Hanoi's unofficial emblem. Early mornings transform the lake into something magical, mist rising from the water while the city slowly wakes, street vendors setting up their portable kitchens, students hurrying to classes, elderly residents taking constitutional walks around the shoreline path. Vietnamese cuisine reaches heights of sophistication in Hanoi, where dishes refined over centuries achieve the perfect balance of flavors, textures, and temperatures. Pho, the beef noodle soup that's become Vietnam's most famous culinary export, originated in this city. Proper Hanoi pho requires beef bones simmered for hours until the broth becomes liquid gold, rice noodles sliced to precise thinness, herbs so fresh they still carry morning dew. Eating pho means pulling up a plastic stool at a street-side shop where the proprietor has perfected one recipe through decades of daily preparation. The soup arrives steaming, aromatic with star anise and cinnamon, topped with paper-thin beef slices that cook in the broth's heat. Fresh herbs, lime wedges, and chili peppers allow each diner to customize their bowl, creating personal variations on a theme. Beyond pho, Hanoi's street food scene offers endless discoveries. Bun cha, grilled pork served with noodles and herbs, fills entire streets with charcoal smoke and caramelizing meat aromas. Banh mi vendors slice baguettes inherited from French colonial times, filling them with combinations of pâté, pickled vegetables, cilantro, and mysterious meats that somehow achieve perfect harmony. Egg coffee, a Hanoi invention, tops strong Vietnamese coffee with whipped egg yolk, creating a drink that's equal parts beverage and dessert. Each dish tells stories about Vietnamese ingenuity, about taking limited ingredients and transforming them through technique and imagination into something memorable. The Temple of Literature stands as testament to Vietnam's scholarly traditions. Built in the 11th century and dedicated to Confucius, this complex served as Vietnam's first university for nearly 700 years. Walking through its successive courtyards feels like moving through time, each gate and pavilion representing different stages of learning and achievement. Stone steles mounted on turtlebacks record the names of students who passed royal examinations, their academic achievements immortalized in stone. The temple's architecture reflects traditional Vietnamese design principles: curved roofs with upturned corners, wooden pillars painted red, courtyards arranged to channel energy and create harmony. Students still visit before exams, praying for success, touching the turtle heads for luck, continuing traditions that span centuries. The contrast between Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum and the French Quarter surrounding it captures Vietnam's complex relationship with its own history. The mausoleum, massive and stern in its Soviet-influenced architecture, houses the preserved body of the man who led Vietnam to independence. Visitors line up daily to file past the glass case where Ho Chi Minh lies in state, the experience solemn and strange, a personality cult made manifest in marble and controlled air. Nearby, his actual house, a modest stilt dwelling, suggests the simpler man behind the mythology, someone who preferred plain living despite his power. The presidential palace grounds, with manicured gardens and colonial-era buildings painted in mustard yellow, add another layer to this historical complexity. The Long Bien Bridge spanning the Red River carries weight beyond its physical structure. Built by French engineers in the early 20th century, this iron bridge survived American bombing during the war, though sections were destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Today, it remains in use despite its scars and patches, trains rumbling across its length while motorbikes and bicycles share the adjacent walkways. Standing on Long Bien at sunset, watching the Red River flow muddy and powerful beneath, you feel history as a living presence. See how the past and present coexist in Vietnam, neither one surrendering entirely to the other. Ha Long Bay on land they call Tam Coc, and the comparison holds merit. Located south of Hanoi in Ninh Binh province, this area features limestone karsts rising from rice paddies instead of water, creating landscapes that shift between terrestrial and aquatic depending on season and flooding. Boat rides through Tam Kok navigate the Ngo Dong River as it winds through caves carved through mountain bases, the oarswomen propelling their boats with feet rather than hands. It's a technique unique to this region. During these passages, darkness envelops the boat before daylight returns, revealing new vistas of limestone cliffs and cultivated fields. Bai Din Pagoda, massive in its modern construction, represents Vietnam's largest Buddhist temple complex, built to accommodate the country's religious revival. The complex sprawls across hillsides, hundreds of steps climbing to temples housing enormous Buddha statues, bronze bells weighing dozens of tons, corridors lined with hundreds of stone arhats, each carved with distinct facial expressions. The scale can feel overwhelming, but the devotion is genuine. Pilgrims traveling from across Vietnam to pray, to light incense, to walk the complex's pathways as a form of moving meditation. The views from upper levels stretch across the entire Tam Kok area, the karsts rising from a checkerboard of rice fields like game pieces on a green board. Traveling further south toward the center of Vietnam means crossing through the narrow waste where the country squeezes down to barely 50 kilometers wide, where mountains press close to the sea, where history flows thick as jungle rivers. Hue, the former imperial capital, sits along the Perfume River, its name derived from the scent of flowers falling into the water from upriver orchards. The city's citadel, modeled after Beijing's Forbidden City, though smaller in scale, enclosed the Vietnamese emperors and their courts during the Nguyen dynasty. War damaged much of the complex, American and North Vietnamese forces battling through its walls and palaces during the Tet Offensive, but enough remains to convey the grandeur that once defined this place. Walking through Hue's imperial city means navigating between what was and what remains. Some palaces have been restored to their original splendor, lacquered columns supporting carved wooden roofs, porcelain mosaics decorating walls, throne rooms arranged according to ancient principles of hierarchy and harmony. Other structures stand as ruins, walls crumbling, foundations exposed, vegetation reclaiming what humans built. This mixture of restoration and ruin creates powerful effects, imagination filling in what artillery shells destroyed, seeing past damage to glimpse former glory. The Forbidden Purple City, innermost sanctum, where only emperors, concubines, and eunuchs could enter, suffered the worst destruction, leaving mainly foundations and scattered fragments, ghosts haunting empty spaces. The imperial tombs, scattered around Hue, offer different perspectives on mortality, power, and legacy. Each Nguyen emperor designed his own tomb complex, creating final resting places that reflect individual personalities and philosophies. Tu Duc's tomb spreads across a forested valley like a miniature city, pavilions and ponds and gardens surrounding the actual burial site, places where the emperor spent time before death, rehearsing his own funeral, contemplating eternity. Khai Dinh's tomb takes a different approach, blending Vietnamese traditions with French influences, creating a structure of concrete and glass that feels more European than Asian, its interior decorated with intricate mosaic work made from broken porcelain and glass. Hoi An, further south along the coast, offers Vietnam at its most seductive. This ancient port town somehow escaped the wars that ravaged much of the country, preserving streets and buildings that date back centuries. Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and European influences blend in Hoi An's architecture, creating a unique aesthetic that belongs nowhere else. The Japanese covered bridge, built in the 16th century, arches over a small canal, its pagoda interior honoring the deities protecting sailors and travelers. Chinese assembly halls feature ornate carvings, incense coils hanging from ceilings that smolder for weeks, altars piled with offerings, courtyards where sunlight patterns shift with the day's passage. At night, Hoi An transforms into something from a dream, hundreds of silk lanterns illuminating the old town in soft, uncolored light. The Thu Bon River becomes a stream of floating candles as visitors release tiny lantern boats carrying wishes and prayers, their lights drifting downstream like fallen stars. The streets fill with strollers, couples, families, everyone moving slowly, enchanted by the atmosphere, by the way lantern light catches on old wood and painted walls, by the reflection of colored lights shimmering on canals and puddles. Restaurants served by candlelight, their tables spilling onto sidewalks, the smell of grilling fish and sizzling pancakes mixing with jasmine and nighttime warmth. Hoi An's tailoring tradition draws visitors seeking custom-made clothing, produced with speed that seems impossible. Choose fabric in the morning. Get measured by tailors whose hands fly across your body with tape measures. I'd return the next day for fitting, and by evening wear a perfectly fitted suit or dress. The town's hundreds of tailor shops compete for business, some producing quality that rivals any bespoke clothier, others churning out adequate work at remarkable prices. This craft continues traditions established when Hoi An served as a major trading port, when merchants from across Asia needed clothing made quickly before ships departed with the next tide. My son, the ruins of an ancient Cham civilization, sits inland from Hoi An amid jungle that spent centuries reclaiming what humans built. These brick temples, constructed between the 4th and 14th centuries, honored Hindu deities during the Champa kingdom's reign over central Vietnam. War damaged many structures, and time has weathered the rest. But enough survives to reveal the sophistication of Cham architecture and devotion. The bricks fit together without mortar, their construction methods still debated by archaeologists. Carvings depicting dancing apsaras, multi-armed deities, and scenes from Hindu mythology decorate surviving walls, some worn nearly smooth, others retaining detail that shows the artisan's skill. The central coast continues south, beaches stretching for miles between mountain and sea. Da Nang, Vietnam's 4th largest city, has embraced modernity while maintaining connections to tradition. The city's Dragon Bridge, spanning the Han River, literally breathes fire and spouts water during weekend shows that draw crowds to riverside parks. Museums showcase Cham artifacts collected from sites across central Vietnam, and stone sculptures of deities and mythological creatures testifying to civilizations that flourished and fell. The nearby Marble Mountains, 5 limestone and marble hills named for the 5 elements, contain caves and temples where Buddhist and Hindu shrines share space, where views from summit pagodas stretch across city to sea. Descending toward the south means approaching Vietnam's commercial heart, where the past's grip loosens and the future rushes forward. Ho Chi Minh City, still called Saigon by many residents and nostalgic expatriates, pulses with energy that never quite stops. This city doesn't sleep so much as doze briefly before lunging back into activity. Motorbikes dominate the streets in numbers that beggar belief. Millions of riders creating rivers of traffic that flow and eddy, somehow finding gaps and routes through what looks like impassable gridlock. Crossing streets becomes an exercise in faith, stepping into traffic and maintaining steady pace while motorbikes part around you like water around rocks. The city's French colonial architecture anchors its character despite the glass towers rising between historic buildings. Notre Dame Cathedral Basilica, built entirely with materials imported from France, stands in the city center, its red brick facade aging gracefully, its twin bell towers punctuating the skyline. The Central Post Office, designed by Gustave Eiffel's firm, features vaulted ceilings and iron framework, its interior more beautiful than functional, a reminder when mail meant handwritten letters delivered by steamer ship. The Opera House, renovated to sparkling cream elegance, hosts performances of traditional and modern productions, its interior maintaining the gilt and grandeur of Belle Epoque design. The War Remnants Museum confronts visitors with Vietnam's recent history, displaying American military equipment captured during the war alongside photographs documenting the conflict's human cost. The museum doesn't pretend toward balance, its narrative one of Vietnamese resistance against foreign aggression, but the photographs transcend propaganda. Images of Agent Orange victims, napalm burns, village massacres force recognition of war's horror. Sitting outside in the courtyard, surrounded by tanks and aircraft, by artillery pieces and helicopters, processing what the museum presents, many visitors confront the weight of history, the price paid for the peace Vietnam now enjoys. The Cu Chi tunnels northwest of Ho Chi Minh City reveal the ingenuity and determination that characterized Vietnamese resistance during the American War. These underground passages, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, housed entire villages during bombing campaigns. The tunnels contained living quarters, hospitals, schools, weapons factories, all carved from earth by hand tools, all designed to disappear beneath enemy feet. Today's visitors can crawl through sections widened to accommodate Western bodies, experiencing cramped darkness that hints at the claustrophobia of spending days underground. Mannequins demonstrate booby traps, displays show improvised weapons, and tour guides, some old enough to remember the war, describe living conditions with matter-of-fact tones that make the hardships seem almost routine. The Mekong Delta spreads south of Ho Chi Minh City, like fingers reaching toward the sea. This region defines water world, land, and river, blending into labyrinths of channels, canals, and distributaries, where the Mekong splits into 9 main branches, Vietnamese call the 9 dragons. Life orients toward the water, houses built on stilts or floating entirely, boats serving as primary transportation, markets conducted from vessel to vessel. The delta's fertility supports Vietnam's rice bowl, endless paddies producing crops that feed the nation and fill export contracts, fish farms raising catfish and shrimp that end up in markets worldwide. Floating markets showcase the delta's unique character, waterborne commerce unchanged by centuries. Kai Rang Market, largest of the delta's floating markets, comes alive before dawn. Hundreds of boats converging, sellers hanging samples of their products on tall poles to advertise their wares. Wholesalers negotiate deals for entire boatloads of pineapples, dragon fruit, rambutans, whatever's in season. Smaller boats weave between the larger vessels, their operators selling single fruits, coffee, or the perfect breakfast of noodle soup prepared on floating kitchens. The scene feels chaotic, but functions with efficiency born from generations of practice, everyone knowing their role in the floating dance. The Central Highlands offer Vietnam's wildest landscapes, regions where mountains covered in thick forests shelter communities living largely outside mainstream Vietnamese culture. The road to Dalat climbs from coastal lowlands into pine forests that seem transplanted from European mountains. The air cooling and thinning as elevation increases. Dalat itself retains the character of the French hill station it was built to be, villas and churches scattered across hillsides, gardens filled with temperate flowers that couldn't survive at lower elevations. Morning mist rolls through valleys, coffee plantations clinging to slopes, their beans prized throughout Vietnam for depth and character developed in these volcanic soils. Waterfalls tumble down cliff faces, their force varying with the season. Nearby paths leading to vantage points where the water's power creates constant rainbows in the mist. The sound of rushing water becomes a constant companion in this region, where erosion has carved grottos beneath the waterfalls themselves, creating chambers where light filters through falling sheets of water. Locals know these spots intimately, guiding visitors along trails that wind through bamboo thickets and across suspension bridges, swaying over gorges filled with ferns. The temperature drops noticeably near these cascades, creating microclimates where certain orchids grow nowhere else in Vietnam, their blooms brief but spectacular. Returning to the lowlands means adjusting once again to heat and humidity, but coastal Vietnam offers its own rewards. The Central Coast stretches for hundreds of kilometers, beaches transitioning from one to another with only rocky headlands separating them. Da Nang sits at this region's heart, a city reinventing itself as waves crash against its shoreline. The beach here extends in both directions, seemingly without end. Morning joggers and Tai Chi practitioners claiming the sand before tourists emerge from hotels. Fishermen still work these waters despite the city's growth, their round basket boats bobbing in surf as they haul nets filled with catch destined for nearby markets. Just south, Hoi An preserves what Da Nang has largely abandoned, a trading port frozen at the moment of its 18th century glory. Walking these streets feels like stepping back through centuries, though the tourists pouring in daily make that illusion incomplete. Still, something authentic persists, particularly at dawn before the crowds arrive. Shop owners sweep sidewalks, incense smoke drifts from family altars, and the Thu Bon River reflects buildings whose wooden facades have weathered countless monsoons. Japanese merchants once lived in this quarter, Chinese traders in that one, each community leaving architectural signatures that merged over time into something distinctly Hoi An. The covered bridge stands as the town's symbol, built by Japanese settlers 4 centuries ago, its interior housing a small temple. Locals cross it countless times daily, barely noticing what visitors photograph obsessively. That juxtaposition defines Hoi An now, a living city that happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, residents going about their business while travelers wander enchanted through lanes lit by silk lanterns. Tailors occupy many storefronts, measuring and cutting fabric with practiced efficiency, promising custom clothing delivered within 24 hours. Some deliver on that promise, others less reliably. But the tradition continues because travelers want something handmade to carry home. Evening transforms the town completely. As daylight fades, hundreds of lanterns illuminate, their colored silk glowing warm against darkening skies. The river becomes a corridor of light, floating lanterns drifting downstream as people make wishes and release them to the current. Restaurants set tables along the water's edge, cooking smells mingling with river scent and incense from nearby temples. Ians play traditional instruments at certain cafes, their melodies floating through humid air as conversations rise and fall around them. Walking these streets after dark means dodging motorbikes still navigating narrow passages, their headlights sweeping across ancient walls. Further south, Nha Trang presents an entirely different coastal experience. This is beach resort territory, high-rise hotels lining a crescent bay where Russian tourists come in such numbers that signs appear in Cyrillic as often as Vietnamese. The beach stretches long and wide, umbrellas and loungers arranged in regimented rows, vendors hawking everything from fresh fruit to temporary tattoos. Offshore islands dot the horizon. Such boat tours departing hourly to visit beaches even more pristine than the mainlands, though development creeps outward year by year. What Nha Trang offers is accessibility and convenience, a place where Vietnam meets international tourism expectations without demanding too much cultural navigation. The seafood is exceptional, restaurants keeping tanks of live fish and crustaceans that customers select before they're prepared. Night markets sell the usual assortment of souvenirs, but also local specialties like dried squid and fish sauce crafted in nearby villages. The waterfront promenade sees steady foot traffic from dawn until late night, locals and visitors sharing the space as waves roll in with comforting regularity. Heading inland from central coastal areas means climbing into the Annamese Cordillera, a mountain range forming Vietnam's spine and its border with Laos. Remote villages cling to these slopes, ethnic minorities maintaining ways of life that modernity has barely touched. The roads here test vehicles and nerves, switchbacks climbing through dense forest where mist can reduce visibility to meters. Small shrines appear at dangerous curves, offerings left for spirits believed to guard these passages. Occasionally, the forest opens to reveal valleys below, rice terraces carved into impossible angles, villages centered around communal houses with peaked roofs. These highlands remain relatively unexplored by mass tourism, though adventurous travelers increasingly seek them out. The rewards are considerable for those making the effort. Villages welcome guests with cautious hospitality, elders sometimes permitting visitors to observe ceremonies that have been performed the same way for generations. The textiles here are extraordinary, woven on backstrap looms with patterns carrying symbolic meanings, natural dyes creating colors that synthetic versions can't quite replicate. Women work these looms in doorways and courtyards, their fingers moving with muscle memory developed over lifetimes. Markets in highland towns operate on schedules dictated by tradition rather than commerce, certain days bringing together communities from surrounding valleys. These gatherings serve social functions as much as economic ones, marriages arranged, disputes mediated, news exchanged along with goods. Visitors wandering these markets encounter products rarely seen elsewhere, wild honey harvested from cliff-face hives, medicinal plants gathered in forests, hand-woven baskets made from specific bamboo species. The atmosphere differs entirely from coastal tourist markets, transactions proceeding with less urgency, relationships mattering as much as prices. The Mekong Delta offers yet another Vietnam, where land and water blur into something between the two. This is rice-growing territory at massive scale, the river branching into countless channels that irrigate fields stretching to every horizon. Houses built on stilts-lined waterways, boats serving as primary transportation, floating markets operating before dawn as farmers sell produce directly from their vessels. The pace here feels slower than elsewhere in Vietnam. dictated by tides and growing seasons rather than urban rhythms. Exploring the delta properly requires abandoning roads for boats and navigating channels that range from wide rivers to canals barely broader than the vessels themselves. Villages appear along these waterways. Children swimming near riverbanks, women washing vegetables in the same water that carries commercial traffic. Small industries operate on islands and banks, brick kilns firing clay from the river, coconut candy workshops where workers stir vast pots of bubbling sugar. Tourists visit these operations, watching processes that have changed little over decades, tasting samples offered with broad smiles. The floating markets remain the delta's defining feature, though their numbers have diminished as roads improved and conventional markets became more accessible. Those that persist operate mainly for tourists now, but the spectacle still impresses. Boats laden with single products. Watermelons or pineapples or greens cluster on the water, sellers hoisting samples on poles so buyers can assess quality from a distance. Wholesale transactions happen alongside retail ones, restaurants and market vendors stocking up as individual shoppers fill baskets. The noise level rises as business accelerates, engines rumbling, vendors calling out, hulls bumping together as boats jostle for position. Life here revolves entirely around water. Rice cultivation follows the flood cycle, fields submerged for months, then drained and planted in careful sequence. Fish farming supplements agriculture, cages suspended in channels where current keeps water flowing. The fish consume rice bran and whatever else locals can gather or afford, growing to market size in months. Harvesting these cages means hauling them to shore, then netting out fish that thrash and leap, buckets filling with product destined for markets across southern Vietnam. Returning to Ho Chi Minh City from the Delta emphasizes the contrasts within Vietnam's south. Where the Delta operates on agricultural rhythms, the city pulses with commercial energy that never fully stops. Even in the darkest hours before dawn, markets are operating, trucks are delivering goods, street cleaners are working their routes. By the time daylight arrives, the city is already in full motion, motorbikes flooding streets, shops opening, the day's business beginning in earnest. The Ben Thanh Market stands as one of the city's oldest landmarks, a colonial-era building whose interior has been subdivided into countless stalls selling everything imaginable. The aisles grow crowded quickly after opening, locals shopping for ingredients while tourists hunt for souvenirs. Prices start high for foreigners, bargaining expected, the dance of offer and counter-offer playing out thousands of times daily. The food section deserves special attention. Vendors selling produce and meats, live poultry in cages awaiting purchase, fish laid out on ice, the combined smells overwhelming but somehow not unpleasant. Outside the market, the city's French colonial heritage appears in architecture scattered throughout older districts. The Opera House stands particularly impressive, its facade maintained meticulously, performances still staged inside, though tickets go mainly to expatriates and wealthy Vietnamese rather than average residents. The former post office, designed by engineers who worked with Eiffel, operates as a functioning postal facility while also serving as a tourist attraction. Inside, maps and murals decorate walls, old telephone booths stand preserved, and visitors queue to send postcards with the Vietnamese stamps affixed. The War Remnants Museum presents a different aspect of recent history, displaying weapons, vehicles, and photographs from the American War as Vietnamese know it. The exhibits make no attempt at neutrality, documenting atrocities and environmental destruction with graphic images and preserved evidence. The experience is heavy, not entertainment, but education in its rawest form. School children visit in organized groups, listening to guides explain events their grandparents lived through. Foreign visitors often emerge visibly affected, confronting perspectives rarely presented in their home countries. Ho Chi Minh City's growth continues relentlessly, construction cranes dotting the skyline, new developments rising in former residential neighborhoods. The city's character shifts as a result, old shophouses demolished to make room for towers, street-level commerce gradually replaced by climate-controlled malls. Longtime residents express mixed feelings about these changes, appreciating improved infrastructure while mourning the loss of familiar landscapes. Young people generally embrace the transformation, seeing opportunities in the city's modernization, eager to participate in Vietnam's economic expansion. Yet traditional life persists in pockets throughout the city. Temple complexes still attract worshippers, incense smoke rising daily from altars. Markets continue operating at neighborhood level, residents preferring face-to-face transactions with vendors they've known for years. Street food remains central to daily life, workers grabbing breakfast from sidewalk carts, lunching at stalls where plastic stools serve as seating. These eating establishments might appear chaotic to newcomers, but they operate with practiced efficiency, orders taken mentally, food prepared rapidly, payment collected as customers finish. The city's District 5, known as Cholon, serves as the center of Vietnamese Chinese community life. The neighborhood feels distinct from surrounding areas, temples dedicated to Chinese deities, shops selling traditional medicine and religious goods, restaurants serving Cantonese and Teochew specialties. The architecture here reflects Chinese influence, narrow shophouses with tiled roofs, courtyards hidden behind street facades. Bin Tay Market operates as Cholon's commercial heart, wholesale trading happening in quantities that dwarf Ben Than's retail focus. As evening approaches, the city's energy shifts rather than diminishes. Bai Vian Street in the Backpacker District fills with tourists and locals drawn to its bars and restaurants. Neon signs flicker to life, spills from doorways. Vendors set up sidewalk operations selling everything from barbecued meat to counterfeit books. The atmosphere grows increasingly raucous as night progresses, travelers from every continent mingling in ways they might not in other contexts. It's not authentically Vietnamese in any traditional sense, but it reflects something real about modern Vietnam's place in global culture. Wealthier Vietnamese frequent different areas entirely. Rooftop bars in District 1 offer panoramic views of the city lights, cocktails mixed with imported spirits, dress codes enforced at doors. These venues cater to young professionals and expatriates, places where deals are discussed and relationships initiated. The prices reflect their clientele, a single drink costing what a street meal might. That economic stratification defines much about contemporary Vietnam, opportunities expanding but benefits distributed unevenly. Beyond the cities and established tourist routes, Vietnam reveals itself differently. The coastal highway between Hue and Hoi An, known as the Hai Van Pass, climbs over mountains offering views that stop traffic literally, vehicles pulling over so passengers can photograph coastline far below. Abandoned military bunkers dot the summit, as reminders of the pass's strategic importance in past conflicts. The descent toward Da Nang reveals the city spread along its bay, development visible even from this height. In the far north near the Chinese border, Ba Bay Lake offers limestone-cast scenery in a quieter setting than Hai Long Bay. The lake stretches through valleys, tour boats cruising past caves and waterfalls, minority villages accessible only by water. Homestay programs allow visitors to sleep in traditional stilt houses, participating in daily activities like rice planting or fishing. The experience provides immersion that hotels can't match, though comfort levels require significant adjustment for those accustomed to modern amenities. The Con Dao Islands, once prison colonies, now attract visitors to their pristine beaches and clear waters. The prison buildings have been preserved as museums, their history dark and brutal. Political prisoners held here under French and later South Vietnamese rule. Today, sea turtles nest on these beaches, conservation programs protecting their eggs, rangers monitoring hatchlings as they make their dash to the ocean. The contrast between the island's violent past and peaceful present feels almost incomprehensible. Vietnam's regional cuisines deserve exploration beyond what street vendors and restaurants typically offer tourists. In the north, dishes tend towards subtle flavors, influences from China evident in certain preparations. Central Vietnam favors spicier profiles, the imperial cuisine of Hue particularly refined, dishes originally created for royalty now available in specialized restaurants. Southern cooking incorporates more sweetness, coconut milk common in curries and soups, the Khmer influence noticeable in certain dishes. Each region claims superiority for its version of phi ho, and the differences are real. Hanoi phi ho tends toward simplicity, clear broth with minimal garnishes, focus on the quality of the beef and the careful balance of flavors in the stock. Southern phi ho comes with a plate of herbs and vegetables, diners customizing their bowls, sweetness more pronounced in the broth. Central variations exist too, though they receive less international attention. Arguing about which style is best occupies Vietnamese as much as it does food critics. Regional pride invested in these bowls of noodles, banh mi represents another dish that varies significantly by region and even by individual vendor. And the basic concept remains constant. A baguette split and filled with various proteins, vegetables, herbs, and sauces. But the execution ranges from simple to elaborate, bread quality varying dramatically, filling combinations limited only by imagination. The best banh mi vendors have loyal followings, customers willing to travel across city districts for their preferred version. Trying multiple examples becomes its own quest for visitors, comparing techniques and flavors, developing personal preferences. Coffee culture pervades Vietnam, consumption per capita among the world's highest. The traditional preparation involves dark roasted beans, often mixed with chicory, brewed through individual metal filters directly over cups. Condensed milk sweetens the result, creating a drink both powerful and dessert-like. Drinking this sireh phê suade over ice provides relief from tropical heat while delivering serious caffeine. Cafes range from sidewalk operations with tiny plastic stools to air-conditioned chains, but the brewing method remains remarkably consistent. Egg coffee, a Hanoi innovation, takes this further. Egg yolks are whipped with condensed milk and sugar until they form a thick foam, then spooned over strong coffee. The result resembles liquid tiramisu more than conventional coffee, rich and sweet and absolutely distinctive. A few cafes claim to have invented the drink, each telling slightly different origin stories, but Giang Cafe's version has achieved legendary status, attracting visitors who wait in line for the privilege of ascending narrow stairs to a cramped loft where the drink is served. Vietnamese coffee culture extends beyond beverages. Cafes serve as social hubs, places where people spend hours over single drinks, watching street life, conducting business, meeting friends. Free Wi-Fi turned these establishments into mobile offices for freelancers and remote workers. The culture differs from Western coffee shop culture, less about productivity and more about presence, occupying space without urgency. Ordering a second drink happens sometimes, but isn't expected, staff rarely pressuring customers to move along. The country's craft beer scene has exploded recently, microbreweries opening in major cities, each experimenting with styles adapted to Vietnamese palates and ingredients. Some incorporate local fruits or herbs, creating brews that don't fit standard categories. Others produce competent versions of IPAs and lagers, satisfying expatriates and Vietnamese alike. The beer culture here was long dominated by cheap lagers consumed with ice, so craft brewing represents a significant shift, reflecting growing middle-class interest in premium products. Rice wine, or rượu, appears at celebrations and ceremonies throughout Vietnam, home production common in rural areas. The alcohol content varies wildly, some versions mild, others potent enough to qualify as moonshine. Snake wine, with preserved serpents visible in bottles, gets marketed to tourists, but locals consume it too, believing in medicinal properties. The taste is harsh, acquired at best, but drinking it often serves social rather than gustatory purposes, toasts building camaraderie. Traditional medicine remains trusted by many Vietnamese. Herbal remedies purchased from specialized shops where practitioners assess customers and prepare customized mixtures. These establishments look like nothing so much as apothecaries from previous centuries, walls lined with jars and drawers containing dried plants, insects, minerals, and more exotic substances. The knowledge required to prepare these remedies passes through apprenticeships, practitioners studying for years before opening their own shops. Whether the treatments work scientifically is debated, but their cultural importance is undeniable. Festivals punctuate the Vietnamese calendar, Tet being the most significant, but hardly the only one. The Mid-Autumn Festival sees children parading with lanterns, mooncakes sold by the millions, performances staged in public spaces. The Hung King's Temple Festival honors legendary founders, pilgrims climbing mountains to pay respects at ancient sites. Wandering Souls Day addresses restless spirits, offerings made to those without descendants to care for their memory. Each festival carries specific traditions, foods associated with observance, activities performed at designated times. Understanding Vietnam requires recognizing how history remains present rather than past. The war ended nearly 5 decades ago, yet its impacts continue shaping the country. Unexploded ordnance still kills and injures people in rural areas. Contamination from Agent Orange affects generations never directly exposed. The country's age demographics reflect the conflict, a missing generation creating unusual population curves. Yet Vietnam has moved forward with remarkable determination, choosing economic development over dwelling on historical grievances. Relations with former enemies have normalized to degrees that seemed impossible immediately after the war. American tourists now rank among the most common foreign visitors, warmly received rather than resented. Trade between Vietnam and the United States has grown exponentially, making America one of Vietnam's largest export markets. Younger Vietnamese express fascination with American culture while maintaining strong national pride. That ability to honor the past while embracing the future characterizes much about contemporary Vietnam. The country's governance remains single-party, the Communist Party controlling political life while allowing significant economic freedom. That contradiction confuses outside observers but appears stable internally. Economic growth has lifted millions from poverty, creating middle and even upper classes where none existed before. That prosperity buys the government considerable legitimacy among citizens who remember or heard stories about harder times. Internet censorship exists, but gets bypassed easily. Social media usage widespread, despite official restrictions. Environmental challenges loom large as development accelerates. Air quality in major cities worsens yearly, motorbike emissions and industrial pollution creating visible smog. Plastic waste clogs waterways and coastlines. Recycling infrastructure inadequate for the volume generated. Deforestation continues in highland areas, consequences appearing in erosion and altered weather patterns. The awareness of these issues grows among younger, educated Vietnamese, but solutions require resources and political will not yet fully mobilized. Climate change threatens Vietnam acutely. Rising sea levels endanger the Mekong Delta, saltwater intrusion already affecting rice cultivation in coastal areas. Typhoons appear to be intensifying, damage from storms increasing. Coral reefs show bleaching and degradation, affecting fish populations that many depend on for livelihood. These aren't abstract future problems, but present challenges requiring adaptation. Some Vietnamese migrate from most affected areas, others invest in defenses, and policymakers debate response strategies. Despite challenges, optimism pervades much of Vietnam. Economic growth continues, opportunities expand, connections to the world deepen. That young Vietnamese travel abroad in unprecedented numbers for education and tourism, returning with new perspectives and ambitions. The country is asserting itself regionally and globally, confident in ways that would have seemed impossible decades ago. That confidence shows in everything from business negotiations to cultural production. Vietnamese cinema has gained international recognition, films screening at major festivals, directors developing distinctive voices. The work often explores tensions between tradition and modernity, rural and urban life, individual desires, and family obligations. Censorship limits certain topics, but filmmakers find ways to address social issues obliquely. Animation and documentary traditions are developing alongside feature films, creating a diverse cinematic landscape. So contemporary art scenes thrive in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, galleries showcasing painting, sculpture, installation, and multimedia work. Some artists address political themes through careful symbolism, others focus on aesthetic exploration, and still others document social change. The market for Vietnamese art grows domestically and internationally, prices rising for established artists, young creators finding audiences through social media and online platforms. Ranges from traditional forms preserved through government support to pop influenced by Korean and Western styles. Young artists blend hip-hop beats with Vietnamese lyrics, sometimes incorporating traditional instruments and melodies. Live avenues operate in major cities, hosting local and international acts. Karaoke remains incredibly popular across all demographics. Private rooms rented by groups who spend entire evenings singing, drinking, and bonding. Fashion in Vietnam moves between extremes. Traditional ao dai worn for special occasions, while street fashion embraces global trends. Young designers are establishing brands that reference Vietnamese heritage while creating contemporary clothing. The country's textile manufacturing expertise, built on decades of producing for international brands, now serves domestic designers creating for local and export markets. Fashion weeks in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City attract regional attention, showcasing Vietnam's creative energy. Literature continues developing despite publishing restrictions, writers finding audiences through online platforms when traditional channels prove inaccessible. Translation makes Vietnamese literature available globally. International readers discovering voices that reflect experiences outside Western canons. Poetry maintains cultural importance. It has lost in many countries. New collections published regularly, readings attended enthusiastically. The tradition of literature as social commentary persists even within current limitations. Education is valued intensely throughout Vietnam, families sacrificing significantly to provide children with opportunities for advancement. Competition for university placement is fierce. Entrance exams determining futures, private tutoring common among those who can afford it. Study abroad programs attract students to Australia, Japan, the United States, and Europe, though most return eventually, bringing skills and experiences home. Literacy rates are high compared to regional neighbors, our educational outcomes strong despite resource constraints. Technology adoption happens rapidly in Vietnam, smartphones ubiquitous even among rural residents and working-class urbanites. Social media platforms see intense engagement, influencer culture thriving, e-commerce growing explosively. Food delivery apps changed eating habits in cities, riders in branded jackets navigating traffic to deliver meals ordered through phones. Digital payment systems have been adopted widely, reducing cash transactions, making commerce faster and more traceable. Transportation infrastructure improves constantly, new highways connecting regions previously requiring long, difficult journeys. The North-South Railway, built during French colonial rule, has been upgraded though it remains slow by international standards. So domestic air travel has expanded dramatically. Budget carriers making flights affordable for middle-class Vietnamese, routes connecting even secondary cities. Urban transit systems are developing in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, though motorbikes still dominate street traffic overwhelmingly. Vietnam's beaches continue attracting developers and tourists, resorts spreading along previously empty coastline. Some development is thoughtful, incorporating local architecture and materials, employing residents, respecting environments. Other projects show less care, concrete towers blocking ocean views, imported workers replacing locals, ecosystems damaged or destroyed. The tension between economic opportunity and environmental preservation plays out visibly along these coasts, outcomes varying by location and regulatory enforcement. Islands off Vietnam's coast range from developed to pristine. Phu Quoc, the largest, has transformed into a major resort destination, international hotel chains building properties, an airport handling direct flights from Asian cities. The development happened rapidly. Too rapidly, according to some, infrastructure struggling to keep pace. Other islands remain largely untouched, accessible only by smaller boats, electricity unreliable or absent, accommodations basic. These places appeal to travelers seeking escape from connectivity and crowds. Diving and snorkeling opportunities exist along much of Vietnam's coast and around its islands, though coral health varies significantly. Some reefs show damage from pollution, dynamite fishing, and climate effects. Protected areas demonstrate that recovery is possible with enforcement and community support. Dive shops operate in coastal towns, taking visitors to better sites, certification courses available for those wanting to learn. The underwater world here doesn't match places like Indonesia or the Philippines, but compelling marine life exists for those knowing where to look. Kayaking, climbing, and trekking opportunities continue developing as adventure tourism grows. Limestone karst formations that make Halong Bay famous also appear inland, offering rock climbing routes of varying difficulty. Rivers in northern and central Vietnam provide kayaking and rafting, conditions depending on season and rainfall. Trekking routes thread through mountains, some well established with homestay networks, others requiring guides and careful planning. And the infrastructure for adventure sports is improving as domestic and international demand increases. Cycling tours operate throughout Vietnam, ranging from single-day rides to multi-week journeys covering the country's length. The main north-south highway carries heavy traffic, but parallel routes through smaller roads allow cyclists to see rural areas at human pace. Tour operators provide support vehicles, arrange accommodations, map routes avoiding worse traffic. Independent cyclists navigate with varying success, welcomed in some areas, finding challenges in others. The cycling community in Vietnam is growing, locals organizing group rides, advocacy for better infrastructure gaining support. Motorcycling attracts those wanting more speed and range than bicycles offer. Purchasing or renting bikes allows extended touring, though international licenses and insurance create complications. The classic route runs from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, or reverse, riders stopping wherever interests them, carrying minimal gear, sleeping in guest houses found along the way. Mechanical problems can arise, roadside mechanics found in most towns, repair quality varying but usually adequate. The sense of freedom this travel provides attracts riders from around the world, Vietnam's roads offering adventure and challenge. Cooking classes have become popular tourist activities, visitors learning to prepare dishes they've enjoyed in restaurants and streets. Classes range from brief demonstrations to full-day experiences, including market visits and hands-on preparation. Learning to balance fish sauce, lime, sugar, and chili, the fundamental flavors of Vietnamese cuisine, gives participants appreciation for the precision involved. Most go home unable to perfectly replicate what they've learned, ingredients unavailable or different, but understanding deepened. Language presents barriers for foreign visitors, Vietnamese being tonal and challenging for non-native speakers. Basic phrases are learnable, but conversation beyond simple transactions proves difficult without serious study. English is spoken in tourist areas and by younger, educated Vietnamese, though fluency varies. In rural areas and among older residents, communication often requires creativity, gestures, translation apps, and patience. The effort to learn even basic Vietnamese is appreciated. Attempts at pronunciation often met with encouragement rather than mockery. Regional dialects complicate matters, Northern, Central, and Southern Vietnamese differing in pronunciation and vocabulary. Someone learning Vietnamese in Hanoi might struggle to understand speakers in Ho Chi Minh City and vice versa. Our central dialects present their own challenges. For outsiders, this complexity is mostly theoretical, basic communication difficult enough regardless of regional variation. But for those studying seriously, choosing which dialect to learn requires strategic thinking. Vietnam's relationship with its diaspora is complex. Millions fled after 1975, settling primarily in the United States, Australia, France, and Canada. For decades, connections with those who left were discouraged or prohibited. Gradually, policies loosened. Visits became possible, then common. Now, overseas Vietnamese, or Viet Kieu, return frequently, some investing in business, others maintaining family connections, still others seeking to understand heritage. They're welcomed for economic contributions while sometimes resented for perceived advantages and different values. Viet Kieu perspectives on Vietnam often differ from those who never left. They remember or inherited memories of the Old South, carry complicated feelings about the government, see changes through comparison with their adopted countries. Younger generations born abroad feel disconnected from Vietnam while still identifying as Vietnamese. Their visits become journeys of discovery and sometimes confusion, finding a country different from what family stories described. The interactions between Viet Kieu and residents can be warm or awkward, bridged by shared heritage, but separated by divergent experiences. Shopping in Vietnam ranges from modern malls with international brands to markets selling local products at negotiable prices. Silk, lacquerware, ceramics, and handicrafts make popular souvenirs, quality varying enormously. Knowing how to assess what you're buying requires education or trusted guidance. Some shops offer genuine craftsmanship, artisans producing beautiful work using traditional techniques. Others sell mass-produced items marketed as handmade, quality poor, prices inflated for tourists who can't distinguish better. Tailoring services, particularly in Hoi An and Hanoi, attract visitors wanting custom clothing at prices far below what they'd pay at home. The best tailors produce excellent work, taking measurements carefully, offering design input, constructing garments that fit perfectly. Others rush jobs, so cutting corners, delivering disappointing results. Reputation matters, recommendations from recent customers valuable. Allowing time for multiple fittings and adjustments increases chances of satisfaction. Some travelers order entire wardrobes, shirts, and suits and dresses produced over several days. Vietnam's night markets create carnival atmospheres in cities and tourist towns. Vendors sell street food, clothing, accessories, and trinkets. Performers entertain crowds, Ians playing for tips, artists creating portraits. The energy level is high, families strolling, teenagers socializing, tourists photographing everything. Prices are generally higher than daytime markets, but the experience itself has value beyond purchases. Eating dinner from multiple stalls while wandering among vendors creates memories many travelers rank among their favorite Vietnam experiences. Returning home from Vietnam often proves harder than expected. The intensity of sensory experiences, the warmth of interactions, the excitement of constant discovery creates attachment that surprises travelers who expected to visit and move on. Many find themselves planning return trips before they've even unpacked. Vietnam has that effect, offering enough depth that weeks or months of exploration still leave much undiscovered. The country reveals itself in layers, initial impressions giving way to deeper understanding, appreciation growing with familiarity. For those who return repeatedly, Vietnam becomes a kind of second home. They develop favorite vendors and restaurants, navigate cities without maps, speak enough Vietnamese for basic interactions. They notice changes between visits, construction altering skylines, new developments opening, streets they remember reconfigured. That evolution is part of Vietnam's appeal, a country in motion, dynamic and forward-looking while still connected to its past. Watching it change becomes its own form of travel experience. Vietnam leaves impressions that persist long after departure. The taste of phi cho eaten at dawn from a sidewalk stall, the sight of rice terraces cascading down mountainsides, the sound of temple bells mixing with motorbike engines, the feeling of tropical rain arriving with sudden intensity, the smell of incense and exhaust and cooking food blending into something distinctly Vietnamese. These memories become touchstones, reasons to return, so stories shared with friends, inspirations for future journeys. The country deserves more than a quick visit. Surface-level tourism misses much of what makes Vietnam remarkable. Time spent wandering without agenda, conversations with locals willing to share perspectives, willingness to eat food and visit places off standard tourist routes. These approaches yield richer experiences. Vietnam rewards curiosity and openness, revealing complexity and beauty to those looking beyond obvious attractions. Whether exploring limestone islands in the north, walking through ancient towns in the center, navigating the waterways of the delta, or losing oneself in urban chaos, Vietnam offers extraordinary diversity within a relatively compact geography. The landscapes alone justify the journey, but it's the people and culture that transform travel into something deeper. Their resilience, creativity, and generosity create connections that transcend language and cultural differences. Vietnam stands as one of Southeast Asia's most compelling destinations, combining natural beauty, historical depth, and contemporary energy in ways few countries match. It challenges visitors while welcoming them, demands adjustment while offering rewards, preserves tradition while embracing change. For travelers seeking more than beaches and temples, seeking instead to understand a place and its people, Vietnam provides endless opportunities. The country is vibrant and complex, difficult and delightful, ancient and modern, somehow all at once. That combination makes it unforgettable.